Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another live edition of Till Mets Do Us Part here on Twitter and on YouTube. That's where you can find us. That's where you can interact with myself and Ibby as we do our podcast. And of course, if you don't have the time right now, you can't sit down and watch the whole thing live. Well, as soon as the broadcast ends, you can head on over to YouTube and Twitter and watch the replay. And then tomorrow morning, it drops as an audio podcast that you can take with you on your way to work, school, wherever you're going, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. And you can find that on Amazon, Google, Apple, Spotify, all of those places and more. John Sapanaro out in sunny Los Angeles, California. Mets are taking on the Dodgers, but it's not here. It is back east where my co-host Matt Ibby Ibanez resides in New Jersey. Ibby, how you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, John. Obviously, there's plenty to talk about when it comes to our Mets since the last time we hit record. We got some good that we can talk about. We got some bad that we can talk about. I don't know if I would say bad, but more so some frustrating things going on. Nothing that I'm too worried about. But once again, we know who we deal with when it comes to this fan base. So of course, it is always doom and gloom. But we will do our best to navigate through that sewage, if you will, and we'll keep everybody on track.
Well, I want to start on a positive note because last week I felt like I really kind of got in the mix, yelling, screaming, and I'm trying to turn over a new leaf. No, I'm just kidding. I don't care about that. I will yell and scream when I need to. I also think, though, that respect should be given, flowers should be given when people deserve them and when they can receive them. And you and I, Ibby, have always talked about the Steve Cohen effect and how it would change this organization and how it has changed this organization in a very, very, very quick way. And we oftentimes talk about what's on the field, because that's the most important thing. Look, until a franchise wins a World Series, until a franchise becomes a sustainable winner the way the Dodgers have since their ownership has changed, well, the other stuff is just window dressing. However, sometimes the window dressing really, really matters. And this time it came in the form of Old Timers Day on Saturday. It was an unbelievable event. I wasn't there. Obviously, I live out on the West Coast, couldn't make it back, but I watched it on the stream. I was following along everybody who was there, the Mets Twitter community that were posting about it. It was absolutely unbelievable. Obviously, we had Hojo on to kind of preview it. We're hoping that we're going to get one of the other old timers coming up soon. We can kind of recap with one of them here on the show. But by all accounts, it was exactly what we as the fans wanted. It's exactly what you wanted, what I wanted, what Mets Twitter wanted, what the organization deserved, what the organization never got under the Wilpons. And it all culminated, I think, in the perfect way when they retired Willie Mays' number. I'm wearing the retire Piazza number from the 7 line from years ago, kind of in honor of that. I mean, look, the Mets waited for Piazza to be in the Hall of Fame to retire his number. Even though he was an all-time great, even though he was an all-time great Met, the Wilpons just would not do it. They waited and they waited and they waited and they waited, right? But now you have Steve Cohen come out there and not only make good on a promise that was decades old, a promise that the Wilpons seemingly just ignored, like, we didn't make the promise, so we don't have to do it. But then, Ibby, they did it in secret.
Yeah.
The Mets organization used to leak like a fucking sieve.
Yeah.
And they had to hold on to this all year or damn near close to it. Maybe they didn't really finally decide to do it until after Cano was gone and nobody was wearing 24. But listen, they released Cano at the beginning of the season, 1 month in. So at least they've been holding on to it since May. So all around, just an unbelievable, excellent job executing, paying homage to what is a great franchise with a lot of history. And just kudos to Steve Cohen, kudos to Sandy Alderson, hat tip to Jay Horowitz, who basically put the whole damn thing together. It was absolutely fantastic. So I know I've been talking for a while. Just your thoughts on everything that happened with Old Timers Day. And how shocked were you, honestly, that they retired the number? Because to me, I flabbergasted. Absolutely flabbergasted.
I was very blown away once it turned to this entire number, retiring ceremony, because I thought it was extremely emotional just hearing Howie speak and the video that they were putting up for Willie towards the end and everything that just culminated. And it was like I was standing there watching it, and the entire day, like you just said, like the thing that never existed with the Wilpons was a sense of Mets pride, like this feeling that every fan should, like, we know that Mets fans are diehards, like we know that, but there was still like there was never this sense of Met pride that beamed beyond the fan base, and like so others can see it as well, and in that positive sense. And that's what Steve Cohen has done. We've talked about it ad nauseum. We've talked about it at length when it comes to just him understanding history and understanding the fan base and what we want in terms of just respect. And everything about that day is a hat tip to him, is a thank you to Jay Horowitz for every person who was a part of that. Made sure that they made it a point to thank Jay Horowitz for how they were treated and how they were taken care of. And we the people that we've had on this show before, whether it was Turk Wendell, whether it was Glendon Rush, it didn't matter who. There's this sense of respect that they were getting because they were players of the past that were finally being shown, like you said, either shown their flowers, given their flowers, or just remembered. Even though they never won, they were still a part of this organization, a part of this franchise that still, no matter what, like for us, 99, 2000, yeah, they never won, but they're still a part of like our hearts as Mets fans, okay? We still have a connection to the 06 team. We still have a connection to these teams like the ones before us that were able to take in 69 and 86. And the way I thought Gary put it best during Old Timers Day was just also saying how this was also for the players that slipped through the cracks, the ones that you might have forgot about because they weren't a part of those winning teams, because a lot of times you're only celebrating those championships. So we know a lot about 69. We know a lot about 86. Hell, we even know a lot about 99 and 2000 because they were close. But some of those guys that's, really were there, they made a difference, but you don't remember because they weren't on those winning teams. It was a special day for them as well. And just the introductions, the game itself was just funny and fun to watch. I thought Andy Chavez can suit up right now and actually catch balls in center field. I thought he was fantastic out there. But yeah, just
Mookie Wilson looks like he could still play.
He could go out there.
What is Mookie, 60 something? I mean, he looked great.
It was a lot of fun to watch those guys just being out there, and Cliff Floyd's ripping the ball. Like it was a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, the number ceremony for Willie, it was fantastic, and everything about that day was just a home run. So that's why I sit here right now and I hand to you, Steve Cohen, your crown. This is your crown to our king. This is for you. I'll get another one for you as well, Jay, friend of the show, Jay Horowitz. Another one for you as well. Fantastic, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, it was absolutely terrific. And, your point about the people that fall through the cracks is so well taken, because when you look at 86 was a folklore team. And it was because of a perfect storm, right? They were a great team on the field, led by a great manager. They had the personalities. They, years later, had the book written by Jeff Pearlman, who was a guest on the show, talked about the experience of creating that book, right? They were legends in their time, but they also became legends since because of the infamy that ensued. Part of what made 86 so special is that it was 86 and 86 alone. Even the things that led to it, they should have lost that World Series till that ball gets through Buckner. You know what I mean? So you look at that, and then you look at some of the bad things that happened afterward. Look, we were robbed from Strawberry. We were robbed from Doc Gooden having these epic careers, these Hall of Fame careers with the Mets. But what we got was one magical season. What we got was a few years of really great success, culminating in the complete fullest way in 86. And then in some ways, those dark years that ensued just added to the legend, because the Mets were the undisputed, unrivaled, unquestioned best team in baseball, 108 wins. The Yankees weren't good at that time. So you look at it and you go, wow, this was a Mets town. It was a time to be alive for a Met fan. And then it was fleeting. It all kind of went away. But that is not to disrespect those players that were here giving their all these players, guys, whether we hate them. And look, we're going to talk in a little bit about some of the players that are underwhelming on this current team, but these guys all work so hard for the most part. I know every once in a while you get those guys who kind of give up and don't care. You know, George Foster is the one that comes to mind, right? Where he's just kind of like out of it. He's checked out. But, you know, I even look across town to Joey Gallo. Like, Joey Gallo has handled this with nothing but class since the moment he was here and then not here. Joey Gallo did not play well. Joey Gallo was not built for New York. It's clear in the comments that he made, but it doesn't mean that Joey Gallo is a piece of garbage. Everything that you would hear about the guy, everything he said, everything I've heard from other people, I've met him once. He actually seems like a very, very nice guy. And, you know, the guy who works hard and is trying. And sometimes you want to be able to honor those guys. There's a little bit of a digression, but you want to honor those guys who maybe didn't capture the ultimate prize. Because you look at it, Ibby, would our generation look at a guy like Jay Payton more like a guy like Ray Knight is looked at if the Mets won that World Series in 2000?
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, Ray Knight becomes a folk hero and Jay Payton becomes a guy who was here. But, you know, when he was talking for the Old Timers Day, they put up his numbers. You're like, wow, Jay Payton had a lot of really good years with the Mets.
He did.
So...
I have to jump in right away because let's remove just the word folk for a second and let's just add hero to Ray Knight, because the fact that he said, I love the New York Mets, I hate the Wilpons, makes him a hero in my book. And that just shows you again that for the years, for me at least, the years that I was almost screaming into the void about the Wilpons and everything, but other fans I know were doing the same thing as I. And that's just saying these things, and people that weren't fans of the team or who didn't follow the team didn't understand what they were doing or really what they weren't doing. And, you know, when you have a player who played under them and had these feelings of regret and doubt and wishing that it wasn't like that, but he couldn't shake it because that's the way it went for him. The fact that he comes out and he says, you know, I love this team. I loved my time here. I don't like the people that were in charge. And I think that goes for a lot of people. And again, it just shows you that Steve Cohen is doing everything proper when it comes to taking care of the past while also looking to shape and mold the future.
I mean, look, Steve Cohen flew everybody in, put everybody up. And I know when you're talking about a baseball team, you know, that should be small potatoes, right? Like, they have deals with airlines and they can make things happen. And obviously they have charters, and Steve Cohen is rich enough. He's probably got God knows how many jets of his own, right? Like, you can make that stuff happen, but you also have to want to. You have to want to do it. It goes back to the All-Star game when, like, the Oakland A's made their guy like they were going to make him fly commercial until, like, the Houston Astros were like, you can just fly with us, man. Like, this is ridiculous. You know, and you see it in little things. You see it reflected in little ways like that. And look, I've never been a proponent of having a second team. I've never been a proponent of jumping ship. Like, you root for the team that you root for. Because, look, if you, like, I moved from New York to LA, right? I would never stop being a Mets fan. But, like, if I did, I'd never have the emotional connection to the Dodgers, let's say, that I do to the Mets, because it's been my whole life. I lived and died by what happened in the late 90s when I was, you know, a teenager, my formative years. I was 12, 13, 14 years old. That's when you're like, oh, my God, I want this. Like, you know, in 2006, when Beltran struck out and that final out was recorded, like, I thought the Mets were a team of destiny that year. I was catatonic for like a half an hour. I just sat in front of the TV screen and did not move. So, like, I'd never have that for another team. So, like, you can't jump ship. I don't believe in that. But I do understand. The one caveat I will say to that is, if a team is good, a team is good, and it's easy to root for. If a team is bad, they're bad, and that sucks. And the Mets and the Jets, my two favorite teams, are historically bad my entire life, but here I am still. The one caveat to that, Ibby, is if you're leaving because of the ownership, because that permeates through fandom, because you're like, I don't want to give these guys money. I don't like the way that they run this franchise. I don't like the way that they treat players that I grew up watching with such little respect. I don't like the way that they don't seem to care whether this team wins or loses the way I care whether this team wins or loses. All of that stuff. Like, there were people who left the Mets as fans, and maybe they just became a baseball fan or stopped watching the sport altogether, when the Wilpons went through what they went through with Madoff. It showed that they were not necessarily good people either. I know there's probably some swindling that happened even to them, but you look at all of this stuff and you go, I could see why you'd want to leave. And I guess what I'm saying is, when you have a former player like Ray Knight, who has not been mentioned, who has not been thought about, who has not been spoken about. This guy's a postseason MVP. Up until Hideki Matsui came around, he was the only World Series MVP to wind up on a different team the following year. And then, of course, it happened with Matsui and the Angels and the Yankees. So, this is a guy who should have been celebrated along with some of the other members of the World Series team in '86, and he never was. And why wasn't he? Well, it's clear now. It's clear he wasn't celebrated because he didn't like them. Now, maybe part of the argument is that he didn't get the deal that he wanted and he didn't want to leave the Mets and he was still bitter about that. That's fine. But you know what? 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later, you should be able to bury that hatchet. Somebody should be the bigger person. At some point, the Wilpons should have said, hey, Ray, we want you to come back. That's old news, man. Then if he says, stick it up your ass, well, then that's still his right, but that's on him.
That's on him then, yeah.
This is a situation where the Wilpon, you think Jeff Wilpon was ever going to be the bigger man?
No.
You can't even
weasel.
say that with a straight face. He's an absolute weasel.
Yeah.
So, I just look at it and I say, that is so emblematic of everything that happened with the Wilpon ownership, from a fan base standpoint, from a former player standpoint, from everything. You saw it live and direct when Ray Knight was just like, I just don't like them.
And just looking into the comments real quick, I see that that Stevie Mack put out the comment. That's true. Ray Knight got a lot of new fans after what he said, and it's true. It's 100% true. Like obviously we all had an affinity for Ray Knight because we think of that clip and we think of him as the MVP, and here comes Knight and the Mets win. Like, everyone remembers that, everyone thinks of that, but it's like, for someone like me, I can say with my hatred for so many years of the Wilpons, and to go along with what you were just saying, look, I knew I was never going to leave being a Mets fan, but I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that there were a couple of years where, I maybe went to the stadium like once because I was so angry with the product that was being put out, the lack of caring, the high prices, but without anything on the field. It's like my anger was really taking over me. And it's like, well, I don't want to give money. Like, why would I? There's no point. And I think a lot of people were doing that. And look, it's winning again. That's why I never understood their whole standpoint. You put a good team out there and you win ball games, you're going to fill that stadium. And I think regardless of who they're facing this year, you look around, that stadium's pretty full. It's not sellouts every night. It's not what I'm saying, but that stadium, it's pretty full. So again, having a great owner, it really changes everything. Changes a lot of things. It changed a lot of things for me, especially when it comes to my attitude, when it came to being a lot more positive as opposed to negative when it came to the franchise. So, and understanding patience as well, which again, some people are still working their way through, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, and just one final thought on Old Timers Day before we turn the page on it. This is just our first chance to react to this since the events. Obviously, we do a weekly podcast, so a lot of you have maybe even seen some of our thoughts on Twitter and things like that. But, we wanted to give it to you in the platform that we have, which is Till Mets Do Us Part. Speaking of, thanks to everybody who's watching live. It's the best way to interact with the show. We got a few more comments from Stevie Mack. Stevie, we're not ignoring you. It's just some of those comments, even though you made them earlier, are going to reflect later in some of the things that we talk about. So we will
don't worry.
Get to all of your comments, I promise, coming up in just a few moments. The last thing I want to say is, for the people, I saw a few people who were like, I understand what Willie Mays meant to New York, but he only played for the Mets for one season and his number shouldn't be retired. I just like, who pissed in your cornflakes, man? Like, like who hurt you? I look, and Ibby, I agree with that sentiment a lot of the time. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with the fact that the Yankees, and I'm not dumping on the Yankees. The Yankees retired too many numbers. For a franchise that's as storied as they are, somebody plays for them for 5 years and they're like, let's retire his number. Let's give him a plaque in Monument Park. It's like, dude, you had Lou Gehrig. You had Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, Joe DiMaggio, Mariano Rivera, Derek Jeter. You had some of the greatest players to ever play baseball, period. Either that or, at the very least, at their position.
Yeah.
And you're going to retire guys' numbers who are like, yeah, they're good. Like, I understand maybe they won some World Series with you, but like, stop, like, let's not make it out like, Jorge Posada is like Pudge Rodriguez or Johnny Bench. Like, calm down for a second. So normally I agree with that sentiment. However, some things are bigger than the one team. And I think that with Willie Mays, he's an all-time great player, indisputably so. Played a lot of his career here in New York. And I know the Giants left. That was their decision. They took him. They took their history. They took their records. They honor it. And quite frankly, Ibby, they do a good job. But he meant something to an entire fan base here that kind of never got to celebrate that. And it was poetic that he came back at the end of his career and that the Mets damn near almost won a World Series that year. He had an on-base percentage of like 405 or something insane in his last year. And look, sometimes you just have to be a good person and honor promises that were made and keep promises that were kept. And I also, and I don't know if this is going to rub some people the wrong way, but baseball for a long time was a segregated sport. And it had a lot of bad roots. And look, it just mirrored life at large in this country, and it is what it is. And they finally rectified that. But, I think the fact that Willie Mays is an African-American ball player who happens to be one of the greatest ball players of all time, who happened to spend a bulk of his career in New York playing for the National League team where they are no longer represented. And then he finished his career on a team that almost won the World Series with the Mets. Like, for me, all of that is enough. And if I have to explain that to somebody, I'm just like, what do you want? Like, then don't watch baseball, man. Go watch, like, I don't know, like get into like badminton or something. Like, what are you doing?
I couldn't tell you how bothered I was, and I wasn't going to let it ruin the high that Old Timers Day brought for me as a fan. Cause like I said, it was emotional watching, but then seeing comments, I can't remember the guy's name, Bronx Mets fan, something. I don't know the handle, but the fact that this guy, I think he follows me. I think he follows the show. So if he's a listener, I got to call you out, man. I'm sorry. But the fact that, you literally jumped into every single person's tweet that posted what had just happened. So whether it was Puma or Tacoma or like run the whole gauntlet, everyone was posting it, right? He literally jumped into every single one saying how it was bullshit, how the Mets are retiring a number of a guy that only played for them for 2 years. And I was just like, what? Of all the things to do in that moment, like you said, who pissed in your cereal? Read the room a little bit. Like, and again, no matter what, he was waiting for someone to back him, but everyone just kept on ripping him in the comments. And like, what do you expect is going to happen? This is one of the all-time greatest ball players ever. His numbers show that. You ask anybody who's been watching baseball for a long time, a lot of people that I ask, a lot of people do say Willie Mays was the greatest that they saw. The old people that I know, they would say Willie Mays was the greatest player I've ever seen. And
that's what my grandfather always said. That he said Willie Mays
stepfather
the best
has
ball
told me
player
that.
he
It's like,
ever saw.
It's unbelievable, and the fact that he has a connection to New York, like you just summed that perfectly. He played for the team that ends up spurning New York, leaving National League Baseball in flux, obviously with the Dodgers leaving as well. And then the team that is birthed is the New York Mets. And then, like you say, he comes back and they almost win the champ. It's just like, it makes too much sense. It does. And I look, I'm not one that's going to like champion the idea of just constantly retiring numbers across the entirety of Major League Baseball. But again, we've seen it with Jackie Robinson. It's warranted. That's proper. If someone said to me, hey, because of what Roberto Clemente has done, number 21, that number should be retired across the games. Like, there are people out there that are complaining about things like that, and I don't understand. So in this situation, New York baseball, that's what this is. Look beyond the Mets for a second. This is New York baseball for the team that was birthed from the fact that two teams left New York to head out west kind of like my co-host did, leave New York, heads out west, and it made too much sense. And the fact that they kept it a secret and it was proper and it was beautiful, and just hearing Howie Rose being the voice over the entire thing, aces.
Yeah, and look, man, I opened up this segment and we opened up talking about Old Timers Day and this entire first half of the show, which quite frankly, it's gone a little bit longer than I expected or I even wanted to. We'll dive into the team on the field here coming up in a couple minutes, but we opened up this segment saying sometimes you got to give people the roses when they deserve them and when they can still smell them, right? And we all talked about what a travesty it was that despite the great playing career, despite the, albeit cut short, great coaching, managing career, Gil Hodges got into the Hall of Fame years and years and years and years and years and years after he passed away. And look, I know Willie Mays has got every accolade in the world. People say he's the best that they've ever seen. He's got his number retired in San Francisco. He's an all-time great. He's in the Hall of Fame, all that stuff. But you know what? Years ago, he was made a promise that his number would be retired here. To some people, that matters. Promises matter. Your word matters. Right? Exactly. Yeah. And so he was made a promise. And for Steve Cohen to deliver and make good on that promise means so much, especially when Willie Mays, we're fortunate enough, Willie Mays is still with us. And like you did something to acknowledge that man, and he deserves the acknowledgement. I don't want to hear like, oh, so what? He's got all that other acknowledgement, so like he doesn't need more. You know what I mean? Like that's like the logic from other people. They're like, well, he's already in the Hall of Fame, and he's already got his number retired by the Giants, and he's already an all-time great, and he already hit all these home runs, and he's already this, and he's already that. Like, all right, well, somebody made him a promise, and then it never happened. And I think it shows great foresight, great reflectiveness of Steve Cohen to say, you know what? I'm going to right this wrong. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix what was never done. I'm going to change it, and I'm going to be the one to do that because I think that matters. And so to me, all the stuff I said in the first part about why it's deserving and why it's important, even from a Mets context, I throw all that out the window. He's an all-time great player, and then somebody told him they were going to do it, and then it never happened. That, to me, that's enough of a reason to do it right then and there. Those two things. Take out everything else I said before.
Yeah, I think that pretty much puts a bow on it. It's like it's a celebration of New York baseball, and like I said, it's proper because of the circumstances that happened. He was made a promise, all-time great player, came back, nearly won with this team. I have zero issues with it, and I love the fact that we're going to be able to look up there and see 24 right next to the recently retired number 17.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic to just celebrate this team's history in whatever way they see fit. And that's the beauty of it, guys. Celebrating history doesn't need to be done with such rigidity. I know it's probably going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because I kind of dumped on the Yankees a little bit for being like kind of free and easy with their number retirements. But, on the flip side of it, you look and you see like what was happening before. Like under the Wilpons, the Mets were like, you had to play the bulk of your career with the Mets and you had to be in the Hall of Fame and that's it. And it's like, well, I'm really, 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 really happy that they sold the team before David Wright was going to be, eligible to have his number retired because David Wright's not going to make the Hall of Fame. David Wright's career was unceremoniously cut short. Does that mean that we should not retire David Wright's number? Because by the Wilpon standards, they would have given it to some guy that they signed off fucking waivers. They would have given number 5 to. Whereas, now I bet you within the next 5 years, we're going to see that number up in the rafters too. And by the way, we should. So, it's just so strange.
Just a quick side note. That always bothered me when you would see numbers in circulation that you hadn't seen, but at the same time, it's like that number shouldn't be worn, even though it wasn't retired. Like obviously nobody was wearing 31, I don't believe. Even before they retired it, but
no one had worn 31.
Right. So, but like the fact is, like I still to this day I would get angry just seeing people wearing, whether it was like 16, 17, 18. Like I would see these numbers being worn. I'm just like, I know you're not going to retire it, but it's pissing me off because I shouldn't see those numbers on anybody but the players that really made those numbers. And that always got under my skin a little bit.
Yeah, or at the very least, like, reserve the number for someone of significance. Do you know what I mean?
Not
like
some freaking bum.
Yeah, like, dude, like Daesung Koo wore 17. You know, I think Frank Catalanato wore 17. Desi Relaford wore 18. Darrell Hamilton, rest in peace, wore 18. Like, you know, you're not talking about all-time great. Look, if Pete Alonso came up and was like, I want to wear 18, okay, fine, wear 18. You're probably going to be a captain on this team. You know, or like if, I don't know, if maybe this is a little bit of sacrilege, but like, let's say the Mets hadn't retired 31 yet for whatever reason. And then they acquire Scherzer, and Scherzer's like, I want to wear 31. I talked to Piazza. I talked to the Mets. They're going to let me do it. Piazza gave me the blessing. He's an all-time great. Scherzer's going to walk into the Hall of Fame. He can take a razor scooter into the Hall of Fame. It's going to be so easy for him. So if that's the case, fine. But, you know, they're giving it out to anybody. It was like, you're like, oh, you're on the team. We just signed you from the international ball. You know, we're giving you a cup of coffee. Wear number 8. Who gives a shit? Like, what? What do you mean, who gives a shit? It's Gary Carter's number, you maniac. What's wrong with you? Just wear it. Just wear it.
Okay, it's just a number. So who cares? Nobody cares.
Marlon Anderson, you can wear number 8. No big deal. I actually think I mixed those two up. I think Desi Relaford wore number 8 and Marlon Anderson wore number 18 or something like that.
No, 18. He might have been. Someone was number 4. I don't know. Either way, doesn't matter.
Anyway, the point is that it's just really, really dumb. Okay, I want to jump back into the comments. Stevie Mac is keeping them flying in, and we kind of ignored you so far, Stevie, except for that one. So if you're a true Mets fan, then you should be more than thrilled that Uncle Stevie is trying to rid all that bad juju from the previous regime, and that's. Really, Ibby, you and I have talked for 31 minutes and counting, and really what Stevie Mac said in one sentence sums up all the points that we've been trying to make here for the 100%. First half an hour. So 100%. Absolutely great. Let's head into the break and let's spend the second half of the show talking about the product on the field and what we've seen over the last couple days with the Rockies, with the Dodgers, right in the thick of this playoff preview type of series. So we're going to take a quick break. For everybody who's watching live, it is just an ad break for our audio version of the podcast. It literally takes 10 seconds. So if you're like, I don't want to sit through the break, I promise you, we're going to be back so fast, you're almost going to be upset. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, Till Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, audio version, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. We will be right back. Yo, we are back. See, I told you, I really had a chance to take a sip of my water. I had to put it down. I almost dropped it. We are back. Till Mets Do Us Part. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Spent the first half talking about Old Timers Day and everything that is going on with the Mets over the last week.
How much the Wilpons suck.
How much the Wilpons suck, which is honestly, look, in a season where the Mets are probably going to win 100 games is not the best topic of conversation about how much the last regime sucked. But it's fun. But it brought things into
the light. It just showed you how great Steve Cohen really is.
Yeah, and you know what? In some ways, to that point, in a season where the Mets might win 100 games and you can actually see sustainable success right there out in front of you and you can reach out and touch it, it's kind of the best time to bring up how much the Wilpons suck. Because, I even said it, Ibby, we talked about it on the show. In 2015, the Mets made it to the World Series despite themselves. That team was not that good. It got hot at the right time, and they ran into a team that knew how to win and was better prepared than they were. And that's ultimately why they didn't win the World Series. But, that team was not some great shakes. They had some great moments. They had a few great players in great spots, but, and it was certainly no thanks to the Wilpons. You basically had Sandy Alderson begging for you on Cespedes.
I said it a couple episodes ago. I said during that season, I went to one of the games and it was hands down one of the worst baseball games I had ever seen in my life. They got their ass kicked by the Cubs and it was 9 innings of some of the worst bad high school type baseball I've ever watched. And that team went to the freaking World Series.
I'm pretty sure, didn't that team get swept the season series by the Cubs only to turn around and sweep them in the playoffs?
Yes.
Yeah. So, just goes to show you. So that's a good segue, Ibby, because, look, the Mets split with the Dodgers in LA. and the Mets lost the first of 3. So, the next 2 games are going to decide, how the season series goes. Since they're not playing 8 games, they're playing 7, there can only be one. There can only be one winner. And so it's going to come down to these next 2 games as far as the season series goes. But, Ibby, it doesn't really matter. I mean, look, the Braves lost again, and that's important. So the last 2 losses the Mets have had, the Braves have also lost. So the Mets haven't lost any ground. And when you're looking at the Mets and you're looking at what they're trying to do, and we talked about it last show at length, the Mets and the Braves are both going to make the playoffs. Okay. It's the Mets are like, I forgot what it was. It's like 16 games up in the loss column for a playoff spot with 30 games to go or something like that against teams that don't play them directly. This is not a Philadelphia Phillies situation where, the destiny is in the hands of the team chasing you directly. They can play you head up, they can beat you, and then, you have a couple stinkers and you lose out. The Mets and the Braves are both going to make the playoffs in some way, shape, or form. So right now, Ibby, the goal is to just keep winning as much as you possibly can. And if that means you take 3 out of 4 from the Rockies instead of sweeping them, look, it's a bummer. The Mets should have won that last game. It sucks they lost 1-0 to the Rockies. It sucks they lost by 1 run to the Dodgers. But I look at it as it's hard to sweep a 4-game series, and it's hard to beat a team that's 52 games over 500 playing with the Dodgers. And then look, I'm not a moral victories guy most of the time. But being able to play with a team that is, the Mets are great. This Dodger team might be generationally great, like all-time great. The Mets team that we're watching is not that level. They're not. I'm sorry, guys. They're not the 98 Yankees. They're not the 86 Mets. They're not. They're really, really, really good, but they're not this good. They're not Dodger good. And that's not to say they can't beat the Dodgers. I just think when you play with them the way the Mets have, splitting the first series, being close with this game, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, when the Giants played really hard, the New York Football Giants, that is, up against the Patriots in that meaningless game when the Patriots were going for the undefeated season. And it proved to the Giants, hey, we could play with these guys. And what'd they do? They ruined the undefeated season and beat them in the only game that truly mattered, which is the Super Bowl. So, all of that said, Ibby, the last few days for the Mets, going back to when we last recorded, they've been successful. 3 out of 4 against the Rockies. And, losing by 1 run to the Dodgers is not something that you need to be embarrassed about, especially when you got Jake on the Hill coming up in a couple hours.
Yeah, this is really coming down to the fact that people are just really pissed off that the Braves won't freaking lose. That's really what it comes down to. Because, like you just said, I look at this and I say there's no shame in taking 3 or 4 from the Rockies. And like you said, yes, losing 1-0 sucks. Max pitches a gem. Offense goes a little bit cold. Look, we've seen that so far with this offense throughout the year. Sometimes it hits these rough patches where, scoring runs becomes a little bit difficult for like a, 5-7 game stretch here and there, whatever. It happens. All right. Ebbs and flow of a season. Is the offense dependent on somebody like Pete? You could say right now, it seems like, it would be nice to have him running on all cylinders like he was at one point. But he's in a little bit of a funk, had a rough game last night. But like you just said, the fact, and I'm not a big moral victory guy either, but the fact that I can look at last night's game, which I wrote about in our Facebook community, just saying how it was a playoff atmosphere baseball. And they didn't cash in on opportunities. They left opportunities out there that they could have, really cashed in and changed the outcome of the game. You can question some of the pitching things. You can question some of the pinch hitting things. Allowing certain people, James McCann, to go up and be in these certain spots where maybe they shouldn't have. Yes, there are plenty of questions there. You see what happened. It's the regular season. You see what happened. And guess what? You take a mental note and you say, okay, this is what happened here. The fact that they lost 4-3 with an offense that's been struggling, lately, tells me that I know that this team can hang and can beat this Dodger team if this offense gets going. And I believe that they can meet this team again in the playoffs, whether it's an NLCS preview. I won't, put the cart before the horse. I won't do that. But if that happens, I'm confident that this offense can get going and can hang with that offense because I know what this starting pitching, keyword there, starting pitching,
Right.
can hang and hold that opposing offense in place as great as it is. And that top of the lineup is incredible with what they've put together over there. But the bigger question is going to come down to the bullpen, which I think is something that we should really hit on as our next talking point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do want to just touch on the offense briefly because, we talk about this sometimes from the standpoint of the opposite direction. And you'll see what I mean if you're listening to this in just a second. A lot of times we go, hey, early in the season, I want to send up a guy like Vogelback who doesn't necessarily hit lefties against the lefty because I want to see if he can do it in a big spot where we might have to have him do that, right?
Right.
And so now I think the Mets are at the part of the season where obviously they're not going to tinker. They're not going to experiment. They need to win these games. The Dodgers can tinker. They have a 19 game lead or whatever in the division.
Right.
They're not going to relinquish it. Their magic number is 15.
90 wins already.
Yeah, their magic number is 15. It's August 31st. Just do the math on that. That's absurd. So, look, or I guess their magic number actually might be 14 now. I think it was 15 heading into last night's game, but I digress. So the Mets don't have that kind of luxury, but also we talk about guys like James McCann. And look, I'm sick of James McCann too. Like James McCann, I'm ready to write it off. Bad signing. They probably should have hung around and waited for Real Muto. It is what it is. They didn't do it. James McCann offers nothing to this team. They're not going to DFA him. It's not going to happen. Are they going to try to trade him or maybe cut bait with him in the winter? I could see that happening. But right now, James McCann's going to be your catcher. He ain't going anywhere. I know that. You know that. Buck Showalter knows that. Billy Epler knows that. So the sooner Mets Twitter gets on board with that, the sooner you could understand the thought process of, look, I understand James McCann's not been good, but Buck Showalter only just got here. James McCann's been hurt for a lot of the season. James McCann has 124 at-bats, Ibby. How are you going to get him going? How are you going to hope that he can deliver if you never, ever, ever give him the opportunity to deliver? And I think in a close game where, your season isn't literally on the line, I think that's as close to as an experiment with James McCann as you can have.
I get you on that. I get that.
Do you understand what I mean?
No, I get you. I get
this might be an NLCS preview. Right, that's what we're talking about. This could potentially be a playoff atmosphere preview between the Mets and the Dodgers. But Mets fans, this is not the NLCS for the Mets versus the Dodgers, where if McCann struggles the way he has all season for the next month, he's not going to be up in that spot if the Mets play the Dodgers in the playoffs. Right. This game, you're not trying to give any away, but I think Buck is trying to show faith in a guy who he's just getting to know, in fairness, and also who has been bad. Yes, to be fair, he's been bad, and I'm very over him. I want to be clear. I'm very over James McCann.
Everybody is.
He's got 124 bats.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to let the guys get at bats so that you can actually, when you need them. Because who else is catching for the Mets? Perez? Nito, they're all the same guy.
It's all the same thing. Yeah, there's no difference.
There's no difference.
No.
So, if you're sitting here telling me the Mets got a better option, well, yeah, but there's going to be guys, you can't always pinch hit for your catcher. This is not a Vogelback rough situation where you're look, lefty's in the game, Ruff is starting. Soon as they go to a righty, I'm bringing in Vogelback. That's it. And then, if one of them has to take an at bat later against the guy that's the same hand as them, it is what it is. Or maybe I can swap somebody else in because it's the DH spot. You can't do that for your catcher. Eventually, your catcher's going to have to try to hit. The Mets are not in a position to carry 3 catchers when the rosters expand tomorrow, Ibby, because none of their catchers are viable offensive options. You only do that when one of them can actually hit. So I look at this and I go, sometimes you gotta roll the dice and see if these guys can produce for you.
It's also, I guarantee this is also, and for me as well, it's the frustration overall with just what has been pretty much a season-long thing with the bottom half of the lineup, where it feels as though once we hit that bottom half, like that 7, 8, 9 area, or depending on how they set the lineup, the 8, 9 area, it's almost as if it's 2 automatic outs, depending on who they have down there.
Yeah.
And I get it. It's beyond frustrating. But like you said, there's not much to offer at the position in terms of offense. The main guy that everyone's talked about the entire year, we'll talk about that in a little bit. He's banged up, so he might not even be a potential option down the road for this year at least. So that pipe dream is no longer here. But in terms of who is here, it's like this is kind of what you're saddled with. And I want to use this as a jumping point to stay in the same area, if you will, with McCann and the bottom half of the lineup, and just bring up something that I think we can bounce off real quick. And that's lineup placement in terms of some of the better hitters in our lineup. A talking point that I saw last night on Twitter, and I think our favorite, Brandon Tierney, brought it up as well, and it was Jeff McNeil. And the fact that Jeff McNeil is a lot of times batting, whether it's 6th or 7th or even not so much anymore, but like sometimes even 8th in this lineup. The idea of having him up in the lineup more, protecting people, or just getting him more at bats is what the point that was being made. And I mentioned this on the show previously, episodes ago, when I was saying how when the bottom half of the lineup is so bad and you're trying to turn it over to get back to the top, having a bat like that at the bottom, I understand it, but I also get the point that people are making where it's like you put a great bat up top because you want him to get more at bats. You want to make sure that he's in positions to help you succeed and score runs. That's the name of the game. So I was just curious on your thought process when hearing, is this idea of Jeff McNeil batting 7th, regardless of who's in the lineup that day, should he be batting right behind Pete? Should he be batting? Look, Nimmo was cold for a while. Should he have been bumped to 1 and Nimmo down the lineup instead? Like, these are the questions that people are asking, because again, this is the time where you can tinker a little bit, not so much with the Dodgers, but more so with the fact that you have such I'll call it a soft schedule for September. That's where you can kind of work your way and say, hey, can this work? Can this work? I want to know what I can do come October.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's actually my one big beef, because look, I said a moment ago, I'm tired of James McCann, and I stand by that, but I'm not tired of Buck Showalter's. People are like, what are they doing with Buck? What is Buck doing having McCann in that spot? No, I'm not down on Buck there. I'm down on McCann. McCann has become, we talked about this in the offseason, me, you, and when Chris Frangiola was on the show. It's predates our doing live video, but it was a great episode. If people want to go back and listen to it. We talked about our least favorite players on the team. And I mentioned that at one point, I always didn't like Ruben Tejada. I always didn't like Lucas Duda. They were players that frustrated me. And the best part about this season was there was no player on this team I was really down on, rolling my eyes hard at and just being like, I don't like this guy. Well, now it has happened, guys. It's James McCann. I don't like James McCann. He's my least favorite player on my favorite team. I'm down on him. But I am a little down on the thought process of Jeff McNeil batting 7th, to your point. And here's why. I think he is wasted when you're going to put him with 2, to use your words, and a lot of times it's been true, I'm not picking on you, automatic outs batting behind him. Right. I would rather bat Jeff McNeil 9th than 7th. Now, I'm not petitioning for that right now. No. I just think it makes more sense. He's going to get probably the same amount of at-bats hitting 9th that he would hitting 7th. You know what I mean? Being in the bottom third of the lineup's not going to make a huge difference. Night in and night out, he'll get the same amount of at-bats. I'd rather bat him last, knowing that there's people up behind him who can drive him in, than I would bat him 7th, knowing he's going to lead off the inning with a double. It's going to be an out, and then it's going to rest on Nimmo, and then if Nimmo doesn't come through, you waste the double. That's what I'm pissed off about. Right. I also think when the Mets first acquired Vogelbach, and then specifically Ruff a couple weeks later, the thought was, you have this interchangeable DH spot. Each guy provides power. Each guy's going to give you a little thump, and you can put them behind Pete to give Pete legitimate protection. And with Vogelbach especially, early on, that paid dividends. It hasn't really worked as far as Ruff is concerned, but they talk about it on the broadcast, on the radio broadcast and the TV broadcast over the last couple of days. Ruff hasn't gotten that many at-bats, so his ability to kind of settle in and get going, I'm not making excuses, but I do think that's legit to a degree. But for whatever reason, Ibby, it's not working. We'll go back to slump, and Ruff hasn't really gotten started. So for me, there is absolutely no reason why Jeff McNeil is not hitting at least 6th. Now, if you're looking as hot as Canna has been, and he's been on a tear the last 14 games, bet 348, he's got 4 home runs, got 13 RBIs. The guy's a monster right now. If you want to tell me against lefties, even though Canna has a little bit of reverse splits, you're going to bat him 5th and Jeff 6th, I'm not going to be mad at that either. But I think those guys have to move up, and Vogelback and or Ruff, whoever's in that DH spot, has to move down at least until they get going again. But right now, Jeff McNeil is out on an island in the 7th spot, and it's not helping anybody. Bat him 5th, bat him 6th, bat him 2nd, bat him 1st, bat him 9th. I don't care. Just don't bat him 7th or 8th. He's getting lost.
I think we're entering a point where you're starting to think ahead, because we do believe that our team is going to be in the playoffs based off of the numbers and everything. I think we're looking at this now. For me, at least, I'm looking at it and I'm saying that come playoff time, and hopefully they start, like I just said, they start fumbling with the lineup a little bit, playing a little bit to see where guys, if you move spots around, how they can do in this last month and how they produce. I believe that Jeff McNeil should be somewhere inside the top 5 of the lineup when it comes to October. And we said it a couple episodes ago. I can't remember which one it was, but the idea that we talked about was basically saying how, if you have a batter like McNeil behind Pete, it forces you to pitch to Pete in situations. Now, right now, anyone's willing to pitch to Pete because he's in a funk. But idea being, things going well, you want to force that pitcher to have to pitch to Pete and not really nibble too much, because if he nibbles and he walks him, then it's like, well, maybe now you got a guy on, maybe you got 2 guys on, and now McNeil's up, who's a lot more of a peskier hitter and who's willing to sacrifice that power to just put the ball in play, and that can cause some trouble for people on the base paths. So I think we are entering a point where Jeff McNeil is going to be somewhere within that top 5 of that lineup, whether that's right behind Pete, whether that's swapping with Nimmo, whatever it may be, he's going to be inside that top 5.
Yeah, and I think he should be, and that's the bottom line. Obviously, I said the stuff about hitting 9th firmly tongue-in-cheek, but there's also a benefit to that over, like I said, 7 and 8, he's at an island. He's just kind of stuck in no man's land, and I don't love that for a guy who hits, 321, who's a bat-to-ball guy. Look, I know there's times McNeil can be pitched to. McNeil's not, let's not make it sound like he's Tony Gwynn, right? Like McNeil strike out sometimes, like McNeil can be pitched to, but he's a contact first guy. Like you said, he said the other day, I think he said he likes not striking out more than he likes getting hits.
Yes.
So that's all you need to know about McNeil. He's trying to put the ball in play constantly, and behind Pete, you can use a guy like that. And even though Canna's shown a lot more pop, Canna is that kind of player too. And so I think having one of those 2 guys behind Pete and then the other one following him, I think that makes the lineup deeper. I think Vogelbach takes a lot of pitches. I think he's got a good eye. Right now he's a little bit down, but there's no reason why Vogelbach can't hit 7th. There's no reason why Darren Ruff shouldn't be hitting 7th based on how he's produced since he's come to the Mets. Him and JD Davis, I think, swapped bodies. So that's a whole thing to talk about there.
Yeah, and they also need to make sure that they find some time to let Vogelbach rest that hammy, because it's that ball hit on the ground. I know he's not fleet of foot, but any ball that's hit on the ground, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, that's an out, or that's a double play, or like anything like if he's not lifting the ball right now, it's a problem because he can't move. It's rough. It's rough to watch, and it's also rough to watch Ruff. But again, like I said, got to get him some more at bats. Obviously, he's in the lineup this entire series because they're throwing 3 lefties, which is a good thing to get him some more reps. Maybe it gets him going. It hasn't been great to watch, to be honest. But like you said, it's tough to just go out there and be cold and expect someone to just start ripping the ball, and they haven't really had much action.
Jumping back into the comments real quick, Stevie Mack, who's been commenting all show long. I think he's the only person. We've had a lot of people watching, but only Stevie Mack has been vocal. He said, you need to clip this and send it to the Mets. I can't promise it'll get to Buck Showalter, but we can clip this and I could send it to somebody at the Mets. I can't promise that me and Ibby will be working in the analytics department next week, but somebody at the I could send it to somebody. I don't know what'll happen, but we could see. But yeah, the other part of it is the bullpen, and I don't want to ignore that. You did mention, I just want to bring this up really quickly now, Ibby, before we turn the page to the bullpen, because I don't know how much time we're going to have to dive in on it, and that is Francisco Alvarez. He did hurt his ankle. He might need surgery. You kind of alluded to it earlier. We've both been scouring Twitter. It looks like his season's going to be done either way. One thing's for sure, he's not getting called up, guys. He's hurt right now.
No, not happening.
He is not an option. Now, Mark Vientos, I think, should be here tomorrow when rosters expand. We can talk about that in a second. But Francisco Alvarez is not coming up. He's either hurt and he's going to get surgery and his season's over, or he's, going on the IL in the minor leagues and maybe his season is over anyway. So it just is what it is. He ain't coming. But we'll turn our page really quick and talk for the last few minutes about that bullpen. And Ibby, look, I know it's been frustrating. I know a lot of Met fans. I've been arguing with people and, they should have got this guy and they should have got that guy and they should have got this guy. I mean, there were two lefties traded at the deadline. Josh Hader, he's got a 23.14 ERA. And Will Smith,
that guy?
I have no idea. And Will Smith, Will Smith was traded from the Braves basically because they were just trying to get rid of him. So, they wanted him out. Those are the two lefties. Chafin wasn't traded. There was not a lot of significant pieces on the left-handed side traded at the deadline. Now, the Mets could have gotten Dave Robertson. I know that. They didn't. They didn't want to give up a top 5 prospect. I've been on record. I would not have given up a top 5 prospect to get David Robertson. Sorry, I would not have done that. I know that some of the guys they've gotten they got Givens and he hasn't been good, but he's also been scoreless 5 out of his last 6. So let's exhale. Let's give him a second. Let's give him a second to get his feet underneath him. But Ibby, people are talking doom and gloom about this bullpen because Tommy Hunter and Joely Rodriguez got in the game. Well, you know what? Tyler McGill's going on rehab assignment today.
Yes.
Okay. Joey Lucchesi is right behind him. David Robertson is about to make his way into the bullpen because Carlos Carrasco is coming back this weekend.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you have a bullpen that might feature. Oh, and I didn't even mention Drew Smith, who's probably going to start a rehab as well this weekend. So you have a bullpen that could have Drew Smith, Tyler McGill, David Peterson, and Joey Lucchesi. Now, I understand that 3 of those guys are starting pitchers mostly, and you don't know what they're going to give you out of the bullpen, and that's fair. But those are quality arms. This bullpen is going to look different in 2 weeks, come hell or high water. So I know it's hard to preach patience to Met fans, but Ibby, they got to be patient because there are reinforcements coming that I think, quite frankly, could be as good as anyone they could have acquired at the deadline.
And obviously, I'll jump right to the opposite side of what people will say to you in that. And this isn't me; this is others. They'll say to you, John, those guys, look at their numbers. Drew Smith, he stinks. He gives up a bunch of home runs, and you don't know what you're going to get with McGill, and who the hell knows what you're getting with Lucchesi. But here's the thing: this is how I would help you when I would jump into the conversation because I'm a good partner. I would say the idea of those guys in the pen is a lot more tantalizing than some of the options that you have right now. I'm always about saying how if you can acquire talent, or in this case, get talent back, that can push people into the roles that they should be in, right? Push them back, not put as much on a certain type of player. So if look, we saw the one time that Buck threw Peterson into a tough spot. I can't remember the game, but he failed. It didn't work. It was
a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks ago. It didn't work. It was a bad call. It happens. Whatever. Outside of that, we've really seen a lot of good out of David Peterson this season. Okay. Now, is he going to be the lefty specialist that can help get big outs in the playoffs? At this point, would I risk him going out there over Joely? Probably. I would. Do I know what I'm going to get from Joey Lucchesi? I love what he gave us last year. I don't know what's going to happen, so I can't really say anything about him just yet. So that's more of a wait-and-see approach. Tyler McGill, that's the one I mentioned a couple episodes ago where I said that, and I believe this. I feel that Tyler McGill is that guy when you're going to be watching the national broadcast of the Mets in the playoffs, and a guy comes in and is pumping heat and striking people out, and everyone's going to go, because people who don't watch it are going to go, who the hell is Tyler McGill? That's what I think he can be. Like, I just picture myself when the Rays go out there and they're bringing all these random guys and they're all pumping heat. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And who's this guy with this crazy delivery? It's just like, I think that Tyler McGill can be that guy. Now, if it happens, still to be seen. Don't know. But I think he has the stuff to be a legit player for us in that pen. And, the idea of that is enough for me to, pull back a little bit and try to, not burn everything down like this bridge to Diaz has been. It's been pretty much burning. But I'm willing to give that a shot, and we'll see how they, finagle things and move things around, make it work in the month of September. Because, like I said, it's a softer schedule, so I think you're going to see a lot of things being tried out, and in preparation for the run in October.
Yeah, I just want to jump back into the comments really quick. Stevie Mac says, so Givens apparently only plays well against good teams. Hey, you know what? In a September stretch run into October, I will take that.
Well, the crazy thing about Givens is the stats show that his numbers elevate in bigger situations. Now, I say that, and a person could clip it and be like, well, you're saying that here, but he blew it against he blew it the other night when he gave the run, but then obviously he gets picked up because they get the walk-off win. But so it's like the one time he blows it. But look, his numbers are not good right now. I get that. He's pitched like a 9 ERA. It's not there. But again, we're at the point where it's September and this is it. Like, you're going to battle with what you have. Look, people can say all they want that Epler blew it, didn't get what he needed, and it's a fair assumption. It's still to be seen because the season's still going on. We'll see what happens in the next couple of months and how it all pans out. But this is what it is. You have some guys that are going to be coming in to help, and hopefully, like I said, those guys can come in, provide something, push other guys back, take some of that pressure off, and hopefully, make this bridge, whatever type it may be, a drawbridge, a bridge with a lot of holes in it, just somehow get across that bridge and get to Diaz.
Yeah, I want to jump back into the comments really quick. Carlos Ramos says,
Carlos.
okay, now I can comment. I've been posting comments on the Twitter live feed, but you didn't see them. Dead,
Sorry,
LOL. That is true.
Sorry, Carlos.
The way StreamYard works, you can simulcast in multiple places, but for some reason, only the YouTube comments come to us on the screen.
Right.
You can comment on YouTube, on Twitter, and we can see it, but I have to one of us has to take our phone out and check. So it's just a little easier for us to see it here. And then he says, McGill, Peterson, Smith equals Garland, Myers, Dibble, Nasty Boys from the 90s Reds. It very much could. And Ibby, I echo your sentiment. I think McGill is the wild card. I think in the truest sense of the word, Lucchesi's probably the wild card because we don't know what we're going to get from him because he's been hurt and he's been a starter most of his career. But it also makes the most sense because there is no time to stretch him out and the Mets don't need him in the rotation right now anyway. It makes the most sense to get Lucchesi some innings at the major league level once he's healthy and ready, if he is healthy and ready. And the only way to do that is in the bullpen. So that one's kind of obvious. And then for Drew Smith, it's more of the same. It's like, look, this guy was elite early in the year when he was healthy and everybody loved him. And then he hit a little bit of a rough patch and then he was hurt. And I'm not sure how long he was pitching where he was hurt. And maybe that played a factor, right? We saw it with Trevor May. Like Trevor May was like, honestly, before I went on the IL, I was hurt for weeks. And it was like, all right, well, I wish you would have said something sooner, but here we are. So Smith is another logical one. The Tyler McGill factor is, guys, as good as Tyler is, I think Tyler's future is still a starter. I think Tyler McGill is going to be in the rotation next year, like not handed a job, but I think the Mets are going to make sure that there is a roster spot for Tyler McGill in the starting rotation. But he's been hurt for a long time. And again, there's no time to get him stretched out. It is not going to happen. So I really like the idea of Tyler McGill coming in with his full arsenal, pumping out 98 to 99 miles an hour in the 8th inning, setting up for Edwin Diaz. That would be elite. And if you could push back a resurgent Seth Lugo into the 6th and 7th inning, and you can push back somebody who's been very good for the Mets all season, although, sometimes his control eludes him a little bit, in Adam Ottavino into the 7th inning, now all of a sudden, now you're looking at a good bullpen again. So, the Mets are right there. I want to go to Stevie Mack. He said, go to a 6-man rotation in September to give everyone more rest. And I think specifically that comment is probably Ibby for the one guy I left out, which is David Peterson. He's stretched out, can be a starter. I don't know about you. In 99.9% of cases, I cannot emphasize this enough. I loathe 6-man rotations. I think it takes guys out of routine and out of rhythm, and I usually think it's a bad idea. The only case where I think it's okay is sometimes early in the season when guys aren't fully stretched out, or when you have a young, really, really, really good stud pitcher who is maybe reaching an innings cap towards the end of the year, and you want to have him potentially ready for, to start in the postseason. I think that makes sense. Or if somebody's coming back from injury in the middle of the season, unless it's one of those situations, I want these guys pitching. Look, Scherzer missed some time. He should be fresh. Bassett has pitched a lot, but the Mets have given him extra days where they can. Carrasco's missed some time. He should be fresh. DeGrom needs to pitch. That's it. He needs to pitch every 5th day. If you want to steal a day for him like they did last week, I got no beef with that. But DeGrom needs to pitch on rotation. And I would say the same thing to a slightly lesser extent about Taijuan Walker. Taijuan Walker needs to pitch on rotation. Those two guys, I don't want to give guys extra rest. I'll give guys an extra day, but I'm not mixing in. And quite frankly, to me, and then I'll let you take it. David Peterson, I don't think David Peterson is good enough as a starting pitcher, despite what he's done for us this year, and he's been really good in some spots. I just don't think he's good enough where you're going to say, oh, okay, if he pitches, then, you're going to get 2 less starts from Scherzer and DeGrom. No. Give me DeGrom, give me Scherzer. I don't want Peterson out there pitching.
I think especially when you have a veteran anchored staff that wants to pitch, and they all look, whether it's Max, Jake, Bassett, they want to be out there. They want to be on because they're regimented people. And look, I'm going based off of what Max said last year as well. He's like, because coming into this, everyone questioned the idea of the money that he was getting because of how he ended things last year with the Dodgers, with the dead arm. And he was like, look, my arm was dead because they took me off of my routine. They gave me more rest than I needed. It screwed up it fatigued my arm because my arm was taken out of its normal routine for a season. So by doing that, my arm went dead because it wasn't being used as much as it was as much as it was used to being utilized. So the idea of a 6-man, I get what you're saying, but I don't agree with it either. I don't agree with the 6-man rotation. I think let these guys go out there, let them throw. And I think the biggest thing, especially when it comes to the starters in conjunction with the bullpen, is that you need to let these guys throw, be stretched out on rotation, because if they need to go 7 innings, you got to let them go 7 innings. If they got to go 8 because you burned your pen the previous day, they got to fucking do it. Because look, we've seen Bassett do it in season so far, where he's picked up the bullpen because they were burned the previous day. He goes out there and throws 7 shutout, throws 8,
and
gives up 2.
Carrasco too. I think Carrasco's gone into the 8th inning twice.
So you have guys doing things like that. I think that's something where it was being questioned last night. Is Buck going to have to start pushing these starters to go a little bit deeper? I think he's going to start pushing these guys a little bit more. I think we're going to see it tonight. Or for people that are listening on the audio, what happened the previous day, because I think Jake's going to go out there. I think Jake's going to go out there and be given a chance to go 100 pitches today. How many innings that is, we'll find out, but I think he's going to go for 100 tonight. It's a big game. And so I think the idea of pushing these guys a little bit so they're ready for October, because I think they're going to be asked to do a lot more than what they've done during the season.
Yeah, and much like, you and I have talked about things that we don't like, phrases and stuff that we don't like to attach. I don't like to call things must-win games unless they are absolutely must-win games. If you're going to be eliminated from the playoffs, do or die, it's a must-win. If you're going to fall out of a playoff spot, even if there's 30 games to go, that's going to be a must-win. The Mets are not in must-win mode, but I think the Mets want to make a statement here. I think
of
the Mets
course.
want to make a statement in more ways than one. I think they want DeGrom to go out and be DeGrom. And I think I agree with you completely. I think DeGrom's getting 100 pitches tonight. If 100 pitches only takes him through 6, so be it. But I think
He's got
if
100,
DeGrom is firing, DeGrom is throwing, DeGrom is being DeGrom, he'll pitch 7, he'll pitch 8, he'll pitch 9. I think I think he's getting 100 pitches.
Today is, like you just said, it's like I said, not saying must win. It's about establishing yourself. And I think today is the game that they want to take so badly because it's Jake, because the idea then is in the back of their mind. It's in fans' minds, it's Dodgers fans' minds, that you meet the Mets in the playoffs. Best believe you're not getting the rotation that you got for this series. You're getting Max as well. It's going to be Max. It's going to be Jake. It's going to be Bassett. It's going to be Carrasco. You're going to get those guys on the front end putting the pressure on you. So if you beat them today with Jake and he handles that offense, it allows the Mets to feel a lot more confident. It allows the fans to feel a lot more confident. And then obviously puts a little thing in the back of Dodgers fans and their front office and their overall team's heads thinking, we got the Mets. We got our work cut out for us when Jake and Max are back to back.
Yeah, and I want to jump back into the comments before we get out of here. Carlos, who was watching us on Twitter and now has joined us here on YouTube so he can live comment. He says, I agree, no 6-man rotation. Plus, if you think about it, Tyler has good 8th inning stuff. I'm confident he will be effective off the pen, to be honest. Yeah, I completely agree.
If Tyler is not, again, this happens a lot of times with starters too, once they get moved to the pen. The fact that you're not saving bullets, if you will, you're just going out there. It's like you're not in that reserve mode. You don't have to go into the reserves trying to really push yourself. And you're thinking, I got to go 6 tonight. I got to go eat. I got to go 7. It's like he can go out there. I won't be shocked if he goes out there for an inning and he pumps 100. I won't. We've watched him to the point where it's like, holy shit, he just pumped 98, 99. He's sitting there for a couple of innings. If he's only going out there for an inning, I think he's going to start pumping 100 miles an hour. I really do.
I agree with you. And look, Ibby, I know we're a little bit over time. We want to get out of here, but I want to keep it with Carlos for a moment because he mentioned this earlier, and I just want to get your take on it. He said, guys, not to backtrack, take you out of your flow, but I posted this comment earlier. I think the reason our bats have been cold is because guys are not taking a lot of pitches anymore. What are your thoughts?
I would say that in situations like this, I think that offenses tend to press when they're not scoring. So they're thinking that they got to play hero ball a little bit. I think it happened last. I think a case in point of that was last night's final at bat was just watching Nimmo with 2 outs. He was taking home run hacks. That's what he was doing. It's like, that's not who you are. Yes, you hit home run. You hit some home runs. I think it's like 12 on the year or whatever. It's like, that's not who you are. I like you working the count. I like you being aggressive. I do. But a lot of times guys tend to play hero ball, especially when the offense goes a little bit cold. And then it kind of just like snowballs. And then you go from 1 game to 3 games to 5 games. And it's just like, where the hell did the offense go? Pete needs a day off. I know he's in the lineup again tonight. I think he needs a day off. But it's just like, I guarantee you the question inside that clubhouse is that, or even in the front office with Epler, it's like, look, I know I need to give Pete a day off, but it's been, no pun, it's been rough with rough. So it's like, if you're throwing him out there against lefties and he's not touching lefties, which he's supposed to do, then you put him out there against a righty and he strikes out 3 times. You're just like, I'd rather take my chances with Pete striking out as opposed, or because I know what he can provide me if he hits the ball, as opposed to with rough. But I think Pete needs a day off. And I think the guys, look, they've done this a couple of times this season so far. They're going to get back into it. They're going to have a game where they're going to single and double everyone to death and put up a couple of runs. But, I still think it comes back to what me and you talked about in the offseason. This team kind of did need another thumper. And you're hoping that, if you can give Vogelback a little bit of a breather, which he's kind of gotten in this series because it's all lefties. I know he had that one at bat last night, but hopefully that allows him to catch his breath a little bit, rest that hammy, and go back to what he was doing at the start. Obviously, that wasn't sustainable what he was doing, but hopefully he can just get back to being that power bat that can provide a little extra behind Pete.
I agree with you. I think guys are just pressing a bit. If you look at the early part of the game when the Mets were, in it and the Mets scored early in that first inning
They're
and the
still
first and
working
second
pitchers
inning,
like
they
their
were working
counts.
pitches.
Yeah.
I think they are pressing when they get behind because I think the Mets know they'll never admit this, of course. Why would they? First of all, they're all pros. Second of all, they when I say they're all pros, I mean they all know that they can go out and get the job done, but they're seeing the same things we all see, guys. This offense goes when Lindor and Pete go. And if
It
Lindor
does.
and Pete don't go, it ain't going. It's like, the Mets offense used to run through Jose Reyes. You look at when Reyes would get on and score runs, like there was that one season, I forget which year it was, but Reyes would score a run in the first inning and the Mets were like, 50-3 when the Mets when Reyes scored them. I'm making up these numbers. We could look it up. I just don't have it in front of me. But he was the guy. Now it's Lindor and Pete. They're the guys, and they should be the guys. Thing is, they're not getting, all season. They've got almost nothing out of the catcher. They've got mostly nothing out of third base unless Diorme's there, and Diorme is not the type of player that Lindor or Pete are from every measurable metric. He's a nice player. He's a good player to have on a winning team, but he's not
good glue guy.
Yeah, he's a good glue guy. Exactly. Yeah. Here's what I would do to answer your question in terms, because I agree with you. I think Pete needs a day off, and we'll get out of here in a couple minutes after this. But Ibby, I know this is controversial because of who the Mets are facing tomorrow. And for those of you who don't know, Clayton Kershaw is coming off of the IL to pitch for the Dodgers tomorrow.
Okay.
Now, it's another left-hander. Okay. It's also a day game after a night game. Now, it's not a full day game. It's 4:10 start, but it's day game after a night game. It's a lefty on the mound, so you're going to get rough in the game. You look at your other DH options, not so great because you're going to want to start Escobar. You're probably going to want to rest Beatty against the tough lefty in Kershaw. You're not going to go to Vogelback. He's hurt anyway. You're not going to go to Naquin in that spot. Tomorrow, the rosters expand.
Uh-oh.
I would play Darren Ruff at first base. I would call up Mark Vientos, and I would DH Mark Vientos, and I would give Pete the day off. That's what I would do if I was running the Mets. I know it's a little bit controversial because it's Kershaw, and do you want to give Vientos Kershaw on his major league debut at home?
Yeah.
It's a day game. It's a Thursday afternoon. It's not going to be jam-packed in there. I say let the kid eat. That's what I would do. And honestly, I would do that anyway. If it's not going to be tomorrow, I would still call up Vientos tomorrow when the rosters expand. And then the Mets are playing the Nationals at home over the weekend. I don't know who's lined up to start, but I would give Vientos one of those games and give Pete a day off there if you wanted to. But Ibby, I would go hyper aggressive if I'm running the Mets. I call up Vientos tomorrow when rosters expand. I tell Pete, you're taking a mental health day. Ruff plays first base. Vientos my DH. And let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I'm tired of always logging onto Twitter, and there's always this discourse of not wanting to call up Vientos because he has the strikeout rate of this, and his numbers aren't that great against lefties if you look at it from this metric and this and this and that. I'm just like, guys, we're to the point now where this guy was not dealt, he was kept, and if you're just going to tell me that this guy stinks this much, like everyone likes to say he does, then number one, I want to know why the hell he was in the futures game. Number two, I want to know why he wasn't dealt then, or at least packaged with someone to then just ship him out and get something else that can help this team win if he doesn't have a future here. It's to the point where rosters expand. You're having a little bit of a funk when it comes to your offense against lefties. It doesn't hurt anybody.
No.
It really doesn't. And it's like if and I can't even use the excuse anymore of protecting his overall value for a trade, because if that was the case, he would be gone already.
Yeah.
You already protected him enough because of the numbers he put up this year in the minors. It's like we're to the point where it's like you got to call the guy up and just see what happens. That's it. Cut and dry.
Everybody agrees. Carlos says, yes, Vientos, yes.
It's that simple. I mean, come on.
Stevie Max says, throw him into the tide, swink or swim, baby.
That's
and
it.
Then Carlos
this is a
again,
chance.
should I schedule the Uber from Syracuse now? I would. If I was running the Mets, I would. Look, Ibby, I said on this show early in the season, when Dom Smith wasn't producing, J.D. Davis wasn't producing, J.D. Davis went on the IL, I said call up Vientos because you're going to know whether or not you need to acquire a DH, that worst case scenario, because you're going to want to replace Smith and J.D. I said that. And look, they replaced Smith, and JD. With the combination of Vogelback, Ruff, and Naquin, they did that. But they might have still had to do that anyway, but I think they could have learned more about Vientos by calling him up when JD was an absolute black hole and when JD was hurt. I would have called him up early. Now, I understand why they didn't, because I understood in May and June strikeout rate. I understood in May and June not a ton of games in AAA. I understood in May and June protecting him in case we want to trade him. But all of that is gone now. He's had plenty of games in AAA. His strikeout rate has gone down to what are, I guess you would say, normalized levels, right? Like they're in the range of somebody who should be called up at this point. Okay. And like you said, you're not protecting him for a trade anymore. I said earlier, I would not have traded a top 5 prospect for a relief pitcher. I stand by that. I would not have traded Mark Vientos to get David Robertson. I'm excluding the 2 people that they drafted this year that are now technically in the top 5 because you can't trade them that quickly anyway. But I would not have traded Mark Vientos to get a relief pitcher. Well, the Mets didn't want to do that either. So if you didn't want to trade him, use him.
And just to make sure that no one looks at this and says that I'm saying this a certain way, what I'm saying is not, I'm not saying that Mark Vientos is at all a savior. It's not what I'm saying. I am saying Mark Vientos is an option to go to because at this point, what do you have to lose? Based off of the production that you got, what does it hurt to give the guy a shot to just see, hey, maybe it's lightning in the bottle. Hey, maybe he comes up and it's bad. And it's just like, it just shows that it's not there for him. And if that's the case, so be it. But at the same time, it's like, if I'm not getting anything from the people that I'm paying a lot more money to get the job done, if it's not happening there, hey, call the kid up, see if he can do something. And if he can, great. If he can't, oh, well, fine, whatever. Nope.
Look, Beatty has not been great. He's had a couple moments, right? But
rough.
Is anybody concerned about Beatty's value? Because he hasn't been great in terms of the results have not been great. But everybody wanted to get all giddy about J.D. Davis's exit velocity for months. Like,
look at Beatty's exit velocities.
Look at Beatty's exit velocity. So he's not producing either. But at least Beatty's 22 years old, for Christ's sake. And, you know, maybe the show is a little too big for him right now. Yeah, 22 years old with a pedigree.
Yeah.
So, you know, his value is not going to be hurt. And Carlos says exactly, couldn't agree more, just give him a shot. He says, no, Ibby, but at this point, it wouldn't hurt. And then Stevie Mack says, if Vientos stinks, then throw DeGrom in at DH if we're desperate enough come playoff time.
Hey,
I know he said LOL at the end, but honestly, it's not crazy.
Why not? He'd rip a double. I know he would.
If you guys watched last week, you know that me and Ibby are pretty sold on the idea of the Mets getting Shohei Ohtani in the offseason. So all this is going to be moot. Once they get Ohtani for next year, he'll be our DH, so it'll be fine. Ibby, hour and 20 minutes in, a lot of great comments and content from the viewers and everything. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I got nothing else. It's just obviously I'm pumped up for DeGrom night tonight, or for yesterday for the audio people are listening tomorrow. But yeah, always fun. Love going live. Love the fact that we're getting more and more people to interact with us. It's always fun. It always adds different elements to the conversation. And hopefully we can start getting some more and more people in here so we can continue having fun.
I completely agree with all that. Couldn't have said it better myself. I'm looking down right now because I'm trying to see if there's any last minute news that we can touch on from a Mets perspective, because not so much on this show, but for some of you who might overlap, you might know, but I also host a Jets show on this podcast network. And every time we sign off, within like 6 minutes of signing off, there's like major Jets news. We always miss it by like a couple minutes. So I'm just checking. Now I've got the fear of God in me. It doesn't look like there's anything.
I got nothing on my end. Yeah,
significant, but yeah. Anyway, this is John Sapanaro. It is Matt Ibby Ibanez. It is till Mets do us part. Mets fans, have faith. We got DeGrom on the mound tonight. We got Bassett coming tomorrow, and then we've got a very, very, very comfortable, soft, pillowy, cushiony landing spot against the Washington Nationals at home this weekend to hopefully fatten up. We are out of here. We will see you guys next week, and we'll leave you with Stevie Mack's comment. LFGM. See you later, dudes. Couldn't have said that any better myself.
Thank you, Stevie.
We'll see you guys next week. Peace.